As you know, I'm Tony Scherba. I'm the CEO and one of the founders here at Yeti. This is a talk that I have been giving at Founders Institute for branding and design. So it is as an intro to branding and design. It's not necessarily like a typical lunch and learn. This will kind of be a overview of a lot of the stuff that we do here, but I figured it would be a good idea to practice it and get some feedback. So without further ado, branding and product design for startups. So as I said, this is a presentation I gave other places. So this is sort of an overview of Yeti and who we are, which I don't think we'll need to do in this audience. But basically, we've been around since 2010, and we build a lot of cool stuff that people have written about and talk about. So to get into branding and why branding is really important for startups and how to think about it. One of the first things that you have to do as a startup is come up with a name for your product or your company. Specifically, a lot of the companies that we've worked with, specifically the client that we had in last week, hasn't actually come up with a name for their product yet. And so we have a lot of experience helping clients here. And so some of the things that I typically tell our clients, and I'm telling some of the companies that we're mentoring right now, is that keys to a name are that they're pronounceable, memorable, and relatable. Another thing that you can add here is spellable. So if somebody has a name and you don't know how to spell it, you're going to actually lose out on a lot of traffic because word of mouth advertising is real and hopefully something that's going to happen with your product. And if somebody has no idea how to spell it because it has a bunch of weird letters in it, they're not going to be able to find your company, which is really bad. One of the major things that I think is important is memorable. So it's something that people are going to remember. Again, like with word of mouth, you need to have the ability to remember the thing that you're talking about. So if it's some really obscure, company name, then you're not going to remember, oh, my friend was telling me about, blah, blah, blah company. You're not going to remember it. So one of the major things, and this was happening with our client the other day, was that you want to come up with a name, and everybody thinks, oh, when I get the right name, it's going to hit me and it's going to feel really awesome. And it's going to be something that we're all going to know the right name as soon as we hear it. That never, ever happens. With Yeti, even Rudy and I were like, let's go with Yeti. And then we're like, yeah, we'll do it until we come up with something better. And then it started growing on us. So you don't have the affiliation of the brand until you actually start using it and you start, making a logo and people start, talking about it. So, now we have all these Yetis all over our office and we call ourselves Yetis and we have a whole theme around it. But, when you're starting out just coming up with a name, you're not going to have that. I really like having this image here. This is actually Apple Computer Company's first logo. So as you can see, that they've done a lot of change and a lot of development with that logo. At the time, why would you name a computer company Apple? It doesn't really make any sense, But now we think of it like, oh, okay, it's Apple. It makes total sense that it's a computer company. At the time, it had really no relation to computers, and even their logo was kind of this funky, illustration. So some of the tips and what we were doing with our client here last week was, brainstorming and word mapping. And then I really like Google image search. So searching, it's an education company that we were working with. And so we were searching education and what are some of the objects related to education that come up when you search something, and that when you search it on Google. And so that's a really good way to start thinking of names for a company. So brands evolve. Here are some of the concepts and logos that we've used at Yeti. We really like our logo now. It's something that we, it's all over. I'm looking around the room. We have 3 different people that have Yeti logos on them right now. We have stickers all over the place and all that. It wasn't the case, very early on. So I got in Photoshop and I made that first logo, and because we needed business cards and we needed a website up. And then over, the course of 5 to 7 years, it's taken us to develop, all of these different logos. And so, you can see how we've shaped it and made it something over time. So it's definitely an iterative process, and it's definitely something that keeps evolving. And we even, want to potentially make some slight tweaks to our logo to make it a little more symmetric and stuff like that down the road. As far as actually building a logo and making a logo, one way to think about that is to think of your logo as your bat symbol. You can kind of see that in our logo, how we wanted to make it our bat signal. But essentially it's, when your customers need you, they should think of your logo in the sky as, we're calling this company to come help us. So a couple ways to make your logo like that is keep it simple, striking, have it have an impact. One color. A lot of times, if you don't have a one color logo, it will be really hard for you to actually put that on merchandise and get it on an affiliate site and stuff like that. Your logo will start looking weird and janky if it's not one color. And then obviously clean lines, so you can vectorize it and you can do all kinds of things with it. And it also contributes to that simple and striking factor. As I mentioned before, brands evolve. You want to continually polish your brand. So, at first, as a startup, you're going to come up with the name of your company, and then you're going to come up with the logo, and then you're going to start developing fonts, and you're going to start developing colors and voice and tone and letterhead. The whole idea is to have your brand be very, very consistent. You don't want to have things haphazardly placed all over the place in different fonts and that they don't look the same. It contributes to the professionalism of your brand and of your company if you have all of these things in place. But you're not going to have them in place all at once. It's going to take a lot of time. Yeti actually right now, we've done a ton of branding work over the last 8 years, and we're looking at actually starting up another branding project to solidify some of the voice and tone elements and some of the pitch deck elements that we have. So just some examples, and again, I'm usually showing this to startups that have never seen these types of things before. This is from our style guide. So here are some of the logos that we use, and actually these are like all of the logos that we use. We don't really ever use any other logos than these in different formats. This is the fonts. If you get something from Yeti, it will use Mallory font, unless there's really extraneous situations when we don't. But there's very specific use cases where we use these and when we use these. But again, it contributes to that professionalism and cohesiveness of brand messaging that we are always using the same fonts. Color palette. So this is our color palette. Again, we don't really use anything other than this color palette when we have our when we're delivering decks and things like that. We've been debating for years whether we want to put a different color in here, but that's like how much of a conversation needs to go into changing even something like a color palette. I talk about trademarks, when I'm giving this talk to companies. I don't think we need to go into that here, but being Yeti is a fairly generic name. There are several other companies that are called Yeti in different areas. What I typically I'm telling startups is that there's many different types of trademarks as far as logos and as far as word marks and things like that. At the end of the day, you need to actually establish proof of use. So you actually need to be using your trademark in order to trademark it. But the major thing is to just make sure that you aren't infringing upon anybody's trademark when you start out as a company. You don't want to spend a ton of time, setting up all of this trademark stuff and then not actually having a company and using it. It can be a real waste of money. But there's a website, and it's on here called Trademarkia, which you can go to and just check you can just check and see if your name has already been trademarked or anything like that. Again, this is, I'll preface this. This is not legal advice. This is just experience in case anybody watches this and makes a decision. And then, so really quickly, I want to talk about design and like how to think about design when you're starting a software company. So this is, I really like this image. It shows what design is and how it gets incorporated into projects or into companies. And so what you'll see is there's three rings in this diagram, and there's technology and business. And a lot of times people are just thinking about technology and business and where those collide and how they're going to be, effective for their company. A major component is design, because that's the piece that brings in marketing and brings in consistency and, really kind of talks to your customer. And so at the center of that is your user experience. So we talk about user experience a lot in our company. Really what user experience comes down to for me is actually it's the product strategy. It's how you're blending the business requirements, the design requirements, and the technology requirements of your product. So another thing I really like showing startups is this diagram, which just kind of shows the breadth of user experience, which is this big circle that kind of encompasses all of a lot of pieces of design. It's how a user experiences your whole product and your company. But most importantly, I show this to companies because I want them to see that there's many different facets of design. There's a lot of different things that go into design. It's not something you just hire a designer and they take care of all of this. You can hire very specific people to help with very specific pieces of it. So really, like, what is design? So I say development is how software works for your computer. Design is how your software works for the user. So you can see a happy Tom there. You've all seen these things because we put these together as a company. This is an example user persona. So what we really want to do in design is figure out, who we're building a product for and what their feelings, goals, influences are, and all of that. From there, we want to build a user journey. So this is an example of a user journey map. What we'll do is say, okay, from the moment someone has a need for your product, how are they going to interact with your product, throughout the life cycle of them being a customer of yours, and all the different touch points and how the product is going to help them through that. And then to get even more granular, we want to build out task flows. So, how somebody is going to, the specific actions they're going to take when they're in your product and working with your product. And so these are some of the things that just go into actually, before you even build the interfaces for your product, some of the things that you need to be thinking about. To tie it back into branding, this is an example of a design system. So we'll take some of those elements of the brand that we've created and actually build out a design system that puts those, fonts and colors and, different stylistic elements in here. This will establish the consistency and the cohesiveness of a product. And then, so just some quick notes on development and design collaboration. Here's a nice pretty waterfall. We don't want to do that. So as we all know here, if you just design everything and then have development implement it, you don't get that harmony of actually developing the user experience where you are taking into account the business and design and technology aspects of things. So getting started with product design, at our shop, we really believe in following the scientific method. So researching, making a hypothesis for how you're going to actually, how you're going to solve a problem for a user, prototyping. So very quickly getting ideas out on paper, testing those ideas, and then iterating upon them. Some of the major mistakes that we've seen clients come to us with and that we've just seen out in the marketplace is thinking of product design as an afterthought. Be like, oh yeah, we're just going to develop the whole thing and then we're going to smack it with a pretty stick and it's gonna look great and work great. You can get some major problems there. Build something without testing. So go and build the whole product and never talk to a user and actually see how they work it. You've probably all seen, us bringing in, users and testing products with them. That's from, learning this over the course of many, many years. We don't want to ever just design and build and then release it to the world and say, oh, we should have thought of that. That's not a good thing to do. And then of course, design everything and then build. That's that waterfall process where you're not taking into account the actual technology constraints that you have. So at Yeti, we've kind of distilled this down into our product design sprint process. It's a 2-week sprint where we are spending 3 days workshopping, where we understand the problem, build out some of those user personas, define some of the things that we want to accomplish in that design sprint, and then ideate, come up with a whole bunch of different ideas for how we can address it. We will then prototype and validate. So actually, what our design team is doing right now is synthesizing some of the validation results that we've had and making recommendations as to, how this product should look and feel and how it should work. Because at the very early stages of product development, those things are incredibly important. And so I always like to leave on an inspirational note. And again, usually I'm talking to a room full of hungry, anxious founders here. Leonardo da Vinci was an excellent ideator, sketcher, and prototyper. So I think, and he's had a huge impact on the world. So it had long since come to my attention that people of accomplishment rarely sat back and let things happen to them. They went out and happened to things. Thanks.